feedback. So, although I like these ideas, giving learners complex problems that are likely they're going to face in the real world and having them figure it out, I think instructors need to be there to provide the guidance, the help, or what I call the scaffolding, the learning guidance to help them as they solve these complex problems. If we don't provide them with adequate guidance and help, they're not going to be able to do it. So I like some of these ideas, but instructional designers can't simply say to the learners, figure it out for yourself. One of the biggest problems I see with online learning is some of my colleagues present problems for students to respond to online and tell the students, discuss with one another. So the students start discussing with one another, but they have the wrong answers. And if the faculty member doesn't get in there and say, you know, that's a good try, consider this, the students are never going to learn these skills. So we can't give up our role as instructors simply because we present students with complex problems and tell them to work with one another. The instructor still has an important role. Finally, trend number 10. You're all saying, thank goodness, now we can go to lunch. Okay, let's go to trend number 10. Mobile learning. How many know what mobile learning is? Every one of you, I'm sure, knows what mobile learning is. All of you have some type of mobile devices. Smartphones, tablets, iPads, e-readers like Kindle. My wife is always looking at books on Kindle. She reads more books in a week than I read in a year. So, there's a growing interest in using mobile devices in the workplace. As a matter of fact, the same survey I talked about before where they asked what percentage of you use serious games, the number one new tool that is currently being used in the workplace to support learning, mobile devices. Over 40% in 2010 said we're using mobile devices to help people in our workplace learn the skills so they can learn it anywhere they are, anytime they want to, using the mobile devices. Look, I try to do work even right before my presentations. This is an article that appeared just 2 weeks ago in EDUCAUSE magazine. The top 10 instructional technology issues in the year 2013 in higher education. The top 10 issues. The number one issue in higher ed, using wireless and device explosion on campus. How can we get students, like all of you here, to use mobile devices to help them learn on campus instead of just sending email messages to one another and saying, where do you want to go for dinner? Okay? So how do you use mobile devices? How can we help improve learning with the use of mobile devices? So, important in higher education, important in business industry, even in K-12 education. Here's a report put out by the New Media Consortium just this year on K-12 education in the United States. New report reveals the 6 EdTech trends to watch in K-12 education. Cloud computing and mobile technology are 2 of the top technologies to watch in education. They go on to say, learning institutions all over the world are exploring ways to make their websites, educational materials, resources, and opportunities available online and optimized for mobile devices. So what have the past 3 slides shown us? They've shown that in the workplace, a great deal of interest in using mobile devices for learning. In higher education, a great deal of interest, number one issue, using them on campus. K-12, very important, cloud computing. So if you're in the field of instructional technology, education technology, or what you call instructional design and technology, and you see that mobile devices are being used more and more frequently to help people learn, it's incumbent upon you to learn about these things so you can, when you work for a company, help design instruction by the use of mobile devices. And again, at Florida State, we have a course to help students do this very thing. Oh, a challenge for designers with regard to mobile learning. Oftentimes, students use mobile devices for things other than learning, to chat with one another, to look online for what the weather's going to be tomorrow, not dealing directly with what we're hoping they learn. The challenge is how can we reduce the distracting influences presented by those devices so as to lessen the likelihood that there'll be distractions and hinder learning. I have no problem with students bringing in mobile devices to the classroom if it's going to help them learn. If it's going to be some distraction, I'm starting to worry about that. So we have to think about ways to solve that problem. Okay, let me conclude. And we're cutting right to 12 o'clock, so I finished right on time. Give myself a pat on the back. Okay, when I was a graduate student, when I was sitting in an auditorium just like this one, almost, I can't believe it, but it's almost 40 years ago. Almost 40 years ago, it's hard to believe. I was taught about instructional design, and I was just taught very few things. I was mainly taught how to use that ADDIE model, analysis, design, development, and so on. So, as I said at the beginning, every time I saw an instructional problem, I thought instructional design was the solution. Now, there's so many more tools that you have. It's not always instruction that we have to design. It's not always in print. So your toolbox, the number of things you have available to solve learning is greatly expanded. These are just 10 of the things that you can do. There's many, many more. I could have spent another 3 hours going over all the trends there are, but I picked out these 10. So your toolbox, the number of solutions you have has greatly increased. So you now have a wider array of options to solve problems. If you have a wider array of options, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to find the right solution to the problem. You're not just going to say, oh, let's give another 3-hour course. Oh, let's have the first 2 weeks of the Social Security Administration training be somebody sitting in the classroom. You're going to have different solutions, more efficient, more effective solutions. And as a result of that, I think the people who you're working with will learn more and will do their job better. I'm very confident about that. And if that's the case, you're going to have greater professional success. You as an instructional designer are going to have greater professional success. So today, I haven't tried to teach you all the details of all these trends. And frankly, I couldn't. I'm not an expert in all 10 of these things. Maybe 3 of them. Maybe 3 out of 10. And you'll never be an expert in all 10. But being aware of them and recognizing there's other solutions to problems, and then sending an organization to the right person or persons to solve them will make you a much more effective instructional designer. So I hope that today at least have gotten you interested in some of these, that as a result you'll learn more about them and it will result in greater professional success for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reiser, for the insightful presentation. I hope everyone here can earn more knowledge from what you have presented today. And Professor Reiser has focused on the top trends in educational and communication technology, for example, performance improvement, and knowledge management, and performance support, and online learning, informative learning, and social media, and educational game. Also, he mentions about the constructivism and learning science, and the last one is mobile learning. That's the top 10 in educational technology right now. So I hope everyone can have knowledge about this seminar. And in the afternoon, we will be here around 1 p.m. and I hope everyone will be here. And don't forget to complete the evaluation form and submit to our team. And we will be here at 1 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we leave, I want to say this afternoon's presentation is very different than this morning's. I really want to encourage you. Some of you may like this, some of you might have thought it's a little boring, I understand. I guarantee you will like this afternoon's presentation. I use some funny video clips. I talk about the funny thing, the activities I use in the classroom to make instruction more effective. I really think you'll enjoy it. So please, whether you like this one or not, come back this afternoon. I look forward to seeing all of you. Thank you very much.
เจอกันตอนบ่ายนะครับ
The presentation this morning. I hope you did too. If you'll close your electronic devices and put them away to pay attention to what we're doing now, that would be good. Is anybody here this afternoon who is not, if you were not here this morning, but you're here now, raise your hand. Okay, so we have one person who is not here this morning. That's fine. So let me just reintroduce myself. I'm Robert Reiser. I'm a professor at Florida State University. I'm the Associate Dean for the College of Education. My area right now is educational research. I'm trained as an instructional designer, but in the past few years, I'm in charge of educational research for the college. This is important because this is what it's all about, the presentation. So let me start it. About 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago, I was very, very fortunate. I got some very good news, and I got some not so good news. The very good news was that I was the winner of the Florida State University Distinguished University Teaching Award. Every year at Florida State, which is a very big school, we have about 1,500 faculty. One faculty member is chosen as the best teacher in the whole university. And I was so happy because I won this award in the year 2000. My students picked me and I was the winner. So this was the proudest moment of my career when I won that award. I was the first one ever from the College of Education to win this. So that was the good news. The bad news was that homecoming, where all the alumni come back, the person who wins this award has to give a lecture at the homecoming about his specialty. So I had to now prepare a presentation now that I won the award. So my thought was, let me make a presentation about the things I do in the classroom to help me win this award. Why did I win this award? So I started reflecting on all the things I do as a professor that I think resulted in my winning the award. And that's what this presentation is all about. Effective teaching, how you can plan it and present it. And I write down here one professor's opinion, because these things I'm going to be talking with you about this afternoon are things I do in the classroom. Some of them, you're going to say, that's a good idea. I would like to do that too. Some of them you might say, I already do that. I know that. I don't have to learn this. And some of these things you might say, that's not me. I don't want to do that. That's okay too. But these are ideas that work for me, and perhaps some of them will work for you, or for, if you're an instructional designer, for the professors that you're working with. So let me share with you now my ideas about how to be an effective college professor, teaching part of the job. There's going to be two parts to the presentation. The first part will be very short, maybe 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about how we can judge whether somebody's a good teacher. In the second part of the presentation, we're going to focus, and that'll be the majority of the time, we're going to talk about how we can improve the quality of teaching. So there'll be two parts to this presentation. Now before I start, I hear a lot of talking out here, so let me see if there's some more people out here who want to come in before I continue. I was hoping to take some people off the street and just bring them in here. I couldn't find it. I ran up to one person and said, no, I don't want to hear you, and they ran the other way. Not really. Okay. So, first let's talk about how we should judge the quality of teaching. Okay. So, congratulations. Congratulations. This is your university symbol, right? This is the rain god, right? See, I learned. Okay. All of you are now members of the KU Teaching Award Committee. So all of you are now judges on the KU Teaching Award Committee. Make believe, okay? Just pretend. Here's what your task is. I want you to select this year's winner of the KU Teaching Award competition. Okay, so make believe that you're a judge and you have to decide who should win the teaching award. Oh, we're giving out handouts. I see. Does everybody have one? Do people have copies of the handouts? Let's wait until everybody has a copy. Raise your hand if you don't have a copy of the handout. Okay, we're all okay. So now you're all members of the KU Teaching Award Committee, and your job is to select the winner of the Outstanding Teaching Award. So, all your professors and all of your colleagues have sent in videos. They've sent in videos to show what good teachers they are. This is all make-believe. This is not really true. So, one of the professors sent in a video, and I want us to watch this video and see whether we think he should win the Best Teacher Award, okay? So I want you to watch the video, it's very short, and let's decide whether this professor should get the Best Teacher Award. So let's watch the video and see whether he should get the Best Teaching Award.
An effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Okay. How many think he should win the award for Best Teacher? No. Very terrible teacher. So, what we have to decide is whether or not that teacher or any of the other teachers should win our Outstanding Teacher or Instructor Award. And our president has a message for us. He says, before we select an award winner, we need to identify the types of evidence we should examine. So what I want you to do, I'd like each of you to turn to your partner, somebody sitting next to you, and think about if you were a judge to pick out the best teacher at the university, what kinds of evidence, what would you want to collect from the professor to determine whether or not he was a good teacher? You understand the question? Turn to your person sitting next to you and discuss what kinds of evidence would you want the professors to submit to your committee to determine whether or not he's a good teacher. Talk to your colleague about that for about a minute, and then we'll see what you can say. Everybody talk to somebody else. You understand the question? What types of evidence do you want to examine? Talk, turn to your neighbor and talk. Find a neighbor. Talk to this lady right back here. Think about 2 or 3 kinds of evidence you would want to examine to see if somebody's a good teacher. And then I want people to be brave, and somebody's going to raise their hand and tell me what their group said. Does somebody have a suggestion for me? Does anybody have a suggestion? What would you do if somebody's a good teacher? What would you want the teacher to do? What would you like him to do in class? What would be good for the teacher to do in class? That's interesting. ask you to say that to the whole group. That's good. That's very good. Okay? Okay? You'll be brave and do it, because that's a very good answer. Okay? Okay. All right. One more minute. Anybody else have one? You have one? Okay, very good. Very good. We got some really, really good answers here. So, if we are trying to figure out if somebody is a good teacher, we need to collect different types of evidence to decide whether he or she's a good teacher. And I had some very interesting ideas that people in the audience shared with me. So there's one young lady sitting way back there. Stand up, and let's all look at her. And tell us what would you be looking for to see if somebody's a good teacher?
I want to have a funny teacher with the...
Here, have the microphone.
I want to have a funny teacher when he teaching in the classroom, and so I think I can understand more than when the teacher is just lecture.
Yes, that was a very, so she said she wants a teacher who's interesting, who's funny, who keeps the class interested. She doesn't want somebody who just lectures. She wants somebody who has interesting activities. So I think that's very good. So I think one thing we're looking for in a good teacher is whether or not the activities that he or she does in the classroom are interesting. So that's good. I fully agree with that. Nice answer. You're promoted. Okay. Now, what's some other kinds of evidence do we want to have? And we heard the ladies in this row here, our guests from industrial education, has an answer for us too. What did your group come up with? Stand up and say it.
I think they have to produce the interesting activities, and also they have to do the self-evaluation. They measure the thing that they taught.
Oh, okay. So, our professor here said, just like our first respondent, that we want to have them do interesting activities, but we also want to measure what they taught, which this gentleman also agrees with. You want to tell us what you said?
For me, I think the first thing, the teacher can communicate with students, and the student can understand him first. And the second is he or she has the kindness for students.
Kindness for students. How can we tell if somebody's kind to the students? What do the students do? How would you gather evidence that the students are kind? Do you fill out an attitude survey at the end of a course like you do here to get student reactions to the course? Sure you do. Okay, so I think we've done. What's your name, by the way?
Katina. Yes.
Katina. And yours is? Katina? Sarah?
Yes.
Like Sarah? No. I'm going to say Sarah because it's easier for me to. Katina and Sarah. And your name is?
Kan.
Make it easy for me.
Kan.
Kan.
K-A-R-N.
Spell it again.
K-A-R-N.
K-A-R-N. Karn. Karn, Katina, and sort of Sarah. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try to remember that. Okay, so the three of them said this. They said that if we're going to judge teaching, one thing we want to look at, just like Karn said, and then they should be interesting, they should be humorous, have good activities. But also, we want to make sure the students have positive attitudes. As Patina said, we want to see if they're kind, if the students like them, and so on. Because students will learn more if they have positive attitudes. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, you're going to be paying more attention than if you don't like me or you think my activities are boring. And then, very importantly, and Sarah said this, we have to measure did the students learn. Because I could be very enjoyable. I could do a lot of funny things up here and tell jokes or have interesting slides, and I could be very nice. But if you don't learn something, I'm not a good teacher. The goal of education is for people to learn. So, if I were on this committee, if I were on the teaching award committee, I'd be looking for 3 kinds of evidence from the professors. I'd want to be seeing what kind of teaching techniques they engage in. Maybe I'd look at a video or I'd look at their lesson plans. I want to see what the students think about the teacher. Do they like him? Do they think he's a good teacher? Do they think the content he teaches is interesting? See how happy that student is? And we want to see whether or not the student learned. So these are the 3 kinds of evidence that I think are important if we're judging whether someone is a good teacher. And I want to thank Patina and Sarah and Karn for coming up with the answers for me. So they're going to give the rest of the lecture. I'm going to sit down. Come on up here. No. That's not giving a reward. That's giving a punishment. I don't want to do that. Okay. Now it's interesting. When you look at these 3 kinds of evidence, one of them, the teaching practices, are the processes or means that we use as teachers. Those are the things we do. And we do these things, we engage in these teaching practices, these processes, to help our students attain some outcomes or some ends. We're trying to improve their attitudes, we're trying to improve their learning. So teachers engage in some processes or means, teaching practices, in order to accomplish some outcomes or ends, improving student attitudes and improving student learning. Okay? The rest of this lecture is going to be focused on this question. What are some of the specific means? What are some of the specific teaching practices we can use to help our students achieve our desired ends? What can we do in the classroom, before we get into the classroom, when we're outside of the classroom, to help students learn more and to help students have a better attitude? And that's what the majority of my lecture is going to be about. So we've talked about how we can judge the quality of teaching. We've said we can judge it by looking at teaching practices, attitudes, learning. And now we want to see how can we improve the quality of our teaching so we can help students learn more, so that we can help students be more positive about what we're teaching. So the bulk of my presentation, the next 40 minutes or so, is going to focus on the answer to this question, or my answer to this question. I don't know if it's everybody's answer, but it's my answer. When I think about what I do as a teacher to make myself a good teacher, I think I do things in 3 areas. I engage in certain practices in the classroom, like I'm doing right now with you. I give my students support outside of the classroom when we're not in the classroom. And I also do a lot of planning to get ready to teach. So what I'm going to do for the next 30 minutes, is talk about what I do in this area, and in this area. So it's going to be very organized. First we'll talk about this, then we'll talk about that, and then we'll conclude by talking about this. And I'm going to give you some specific things that I do that help me be a better teacher. First, let's talk about teacher planning practices. When I think about how I plan my instruction, I think about doing it at 4 different times. I typically plan at 4 different times. I plan before the course begins, like the beginning of the semester. I plan before each class period. Everybody, by the way, most every professor does this and does this. I'm going to get into some specifics about what I do, but most professors do this. This is an interesting one. I also do planning after the class is over, and we're going to talk a little bit about how I do that. And the last thing that I do is I plan at the very end of the semester when the course is over. So let's talk about how I plan and how I plan at 4 different times. First, let's talk about the planning I do before the course begins. The first thing I do when I have a new course or when I'm teaching the same course for the second, third, fourth, 10th time is identify what it is I want my students to learn. What are my goals and objectives? I don't simply say, well, I'm going to teach them everything there is to know about instruction design and technology. I say to myself, what is it that I want them to learn about instruction? Do I want them to be able to describe the latest trends in instruction design and technology? Do I want them to be able to apply those trends in a situation? So I start out about being very clear about what I want my students to learn. If you know what your goal is, then you can follow a path to get there. If you don't know what your goal is, you're going to go all over the place and never get anywhere. So I think it's very important that whenever we start teaching a course, right, if we're an instructional designer and helping a faculty member teach a course, we have a very clear goal in mind so we can end up heading towards that goal. I then select teaching materials that are specifically designed to help my students achieve the goal. I don't simply give them a textbook and say, read all the chapters in the textbook. If I have a textbook, I pick out those chapters and sometimes only pieces of a chapter that I think will help the students attain the goal. Simply because there's a chapter in the book I'm teaching about distance learning and there's a chapter in the book on distance learning doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help them achieve the goal. So I'll look at that chapter and say, oh look, these pages in the chapter will help them, these won't. And I give them less pages to read. They're more likely to read if you give them less to read, if you give them just the things that are most important. So again, you're picking materials to help your students attain their goals. I think about the kind of in-class activities I want them to engage in. One of the courses I teach is to teach my students how to write good journal articles, research papers. So if you're teaching your students, I want you all to think about this for a minute. You're teaching a course where you want your students to be able to write good research papers. Would your main instructional activity be lecturing about how to write good research papers? Should that be the main thing you do in the classroom? What would be a very important thing for you to do in the classroom if you want your students to be able to write good research papers? You want them to practice writing the papers. If I just stand up there and say to them, look at this wonderful research paper, see how well written it is? And I say, if they did this, I need to do that for sure. But if I don't give them practice writing the paper, they're not practicing the behaviors they need to acquire. So we want to make sure the things we ask the students to do in the class give them practice in attaining the goals and objectives we have in mind. I'm going to show you an example of this in a moment. I identify the major assignments. So when I pick out an assignment, like a test or a project, I make sure that the assignment requires them to perform the same behavior that's my goal or my objective. Let's look at this. This is one of the most important slides you'll see in the whole presentation. What this slide shows is how everything is related. If you're clear about what your goals and objectives are, then you want to make sure that all your instructional activities will help your students acquire those goals and objectives. If you're teaching about how to write a journal article, you want to make sure your activities give students practice in writing a journal article. You just don't want them to be able to talk about it, you want them to be able to do it. So you want to make sure your activities match your goals. Also, when you're testing your students, and it doesn't have to be a written test, they can create some product, they can write a journal article, you want to make sure the test measures the behavior you specified in the goals. So if my goal is students at the end of this course will be able to write a good research paper, then my test shouldn't be, here's 3 different essays, which one do you think is the best? That's not what I'm trying to have them accomplish. I want them to write a good paper. So my test would be write a good research paper, and then I see if they've acquired the goals or objectives. The idea here is to align your objectives, your instruction, and your assessment, so they're all going in the same direction. It's like aligning a car. If the tires of your car are not well aligned, you're going to go in a crooked fashion. If they're all in alignment, you're going to go in a straight direction. And that's what we're trying to do with our students. We want them to acquire certain skills, and this is how we do it. Make our activities match our goals, make our tests match our goals. Here's an excerpt from my course syllabus, one of my course syllabi. One of the courses I teach is Trends and Issues in Our Field. Here's just portions of it. One of my objectives in this course is I want the students, this is what students do, not what I do. I say to the students, one of the things I want you to do by the end of this unit is describe how the new trends we're learning about, and I teach them about 8 or 10 different trends, actually more like 15, how they might be applied. So I don't just want them to learn the facts, I want them to be able to apply. That's my goal. So notice, I pick out portions of my textbook that focus on application. You can't see that from this, but these chapters focus on application. More importantly, in class, the types of in-class activities are case studies where they just don't hear a research lecture. Instead, they practice applying the trends. Notice these terms, practice applying trends. That's exactly what I want them to do for the course. I want them to be able to apply trends in given situations. And then, at the end of the semester, I have them write a paper where, again, they do that very thing. They have to describe how some of the trends might be applied. And each time I give them a different situation, so it's not like they're just saying the same thing over and over again. Each is a different situation, but in each case, they're practicing the behavior I want them to acquire. I'm making sure their instructional activities match and the test matches. I'm making sure these three things are all in alignment. If you do that, immediately, you're going to be a better instructor and your students are going to learn more. Think about all the courses that you've been in where you had a test and you said, I didn't know this was going to be on the test. I didn't know this was going to be covered. The professor, that's because his test isn't aligned with his objectives. It's not aligned with his instructional activities. You don't want that. You want everything to be in alignment. So keep this in mind and try to do that when you're designing instruction or when you're teaching a course. And my students always say, oh, Dr. Reiser, it was so clear what you wanted to learn because everything we did in class, or almost everything, was related to your goals. You let us know what the goals were. And your tests were always very honest and straight because you asked us to do exactly what you said you wanted us to do. So, those are the things I do at the very beginning of the semester to make sure my course is well designed. But then, as most professors do, the day before the class, or sometimes even the morning of the class, I also do some more planning. And again, I ask myself, okay, today's class is on such and such. What do I want the students to learn by the end of the class today? So I have a very clear picture of what I want them to be able to accomplish by the end of the day. Then I look back, if I've taught the course before, and review and revise the previous activities I used. I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, just in a moment. I also plan new activities if I think I need new ones. And again, I'm going to show you how to figure this out when we talk about the planning that you do afterwards. So, but these are two things I do before each class. And then I use a lot of media. I like using media. Notice in this class, we've already used this lecture. We've already used PowerPoint slides. I've used a video. Oftentimes, I'll use CDs or DVDs, or I'll interview faculty at a distance via Skype. Why do I do that? It keeps the lesson interesting. It also helps the learners focus on the key points. I'm saying lots of words here, and I'm saying them kind of fast because I talk, so you might not be able to keep up with me. But by having the key points up here, it emphasizes what I want you to know. It also helps me as an instructor because I don't have to look at my lecture notes. This is kind of guiding what I'm saying to you. So I strongly urge you to make use of PowerPoint judiciously. I don't want you to have a screen that has 70,000 words on it. But if you can use it judiciously, and if you can use other media, your students are going to be more interested and want to come to class and to learn more. Now, that's the planning I do before each class. But I do planning after the class is over. When you come out of a class that you're teaching, or a class that you're in, sometimes things went very well, sometimes it didn't go so well. And you often reflect on that. You say, what worked well today and what didn't? And then if it didn't work well, you usually get angry, and you either say, oh, those students, they were all sleepy today, they didn't pay attention. And then you go home to your spouse and say, oh, I hate those students, they just didn't pay attention. That's not going to make you a better teacher. That's not going to do anything. That's not going to help you. What you need to do is not only reflect, but record. Take a piece of paper, go into your computer, write down, this can take you 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Write down what went well and what didn't. I oftentimes write notes to myself on my computer. I have a file for each lesson. And I'll have their notes, and it'll say things like, portion of the lesson today on practice activities went great. do it exactly the same next year. So next year, when I open up that note, I know that worked well. But if something doesn't work well, you want to write that down too. Here's an example. This is actually a note that appears on my computer that I wrote in fall 2008. It's under a file for this. I said, I came out of class, I wasn't happy with an activity that the students had engaged in. Something I had designed. I said, students didn't understand the part of the lesson on learning strategies. Revise. This is something I write to myself. Using clearer examples. Maybe discuss mnemonic devices. Now it's fall, that was fall 2008. I teach this course once a year. It's now fall 2009. I'm about to teach a lesson on learning strategies. I open up my computer. I open up my file on learning strategies. I see this